Welcome to Paradise in the Pines, a podcast about the people, places, and stories that make this the home of American golf. Brought to you by the Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Paradise in the Pines. I'm Phil Wers, President and CEO of the Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we are really honored today to have Pat Corso with us. This gentleman needs no explanation. Your resume is so long it would take the entire show, but it's great to see you, Pat. I know you're retired and you're kind of jet-setting around the world and between here, Michigan, Italy, but great to see you. How you been?
Hey, I've been great, Phil. Thank you. Yeah, enjoying retirement. Miss seeing you. Miss seeing a lot of the folks we've had the joy of being around for so long. But you move on, and it's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you're a big Chicago White Sox fan too, so I knew you'd be keeping up with that this summer.
Game and a half out right now.
Well, it's awesome to see you back in the Pinehurst area. And when you first got here, I think about the New York Mets because it was 1986, and they won the World Series in 19. So you got here in 1986. What was Pinehurst like when you got here, and what did you know about the place when you first got here?
Well, I'll start with that part. I didn't really know Pinehurst very well. I knew it was a place that had a lot of golf courses. The company that had bought it in 1984, Club Corp and Robert Dedman, really were just beginning to try to restore it. Prior to that, as you may remember, it was a consortium of 12 banks that owned it.
Right.
Diamond Head Corporation had basically failed and handed the keys back, and then they were appointed a receiver, Ed Coleman, who's still alive and lives in Pinehurst, and his job was to try to find someone to buy those assets. And Robert Dedman came along. He wanted the golf. Coleman said, yeah, you're going to take the whole thing, the hotel too. He said, all right. And he bought it. And then they were acquiring resorts at that time. So I was running a resort up in northern Michigan called Schuss Mountain, Shanty Creek Schuss Mountain today. And they transferred me here in 1986, and I became president in 1987. And at the time, it was just the beginning of renovations of what the resort has become today. It was pretty tough shape,
right?
Physically, it was a tough shape with the golf courses as well. It took a lot of time and effort and money to put it back in order. And at that time, there were only about 1,800 people that lived in Pinehurst.
Wow.
Today, what is there? 18,000, I think.
Almost 20,000. Yeah, they'll be double that by 2030.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me, having been here that long, that when you look at the community and the sense of place that it hasn't changed. A lot of folks think there's too many people. I don't know. I don't think it's changed the character of the place. We used to say that you could look at the village on an aerial view from the 1930s, and the only thing that would change would be the models of the cars. And that's about the truth. So that's
in many ways, yes.
That continues to make us a very, very unique piece of Americana.
When you look at Pinehurst Resort now, an absolute monolith, and we'll get into where they are today and with the USGA, but when you got here, and I mean, it had to be an enormous challenge because it was not the Pinehurst Resort that we know today. What were the things that you got there and said, you know what, we need to do this, or working with Mr. Dedman? I mean, there had to be a lot of moving parts to try to resurrect this historic resort to what it's become today.
Well, again, it was physical improvements that needed to be made. The hotel, the Carolina, was in bad shape. There was the porte cochere that you see today didn't exist. The one that was there was neon, had a neon green sign that said Pinehurst. And one day I walked into the office and it fell. It just fell off. The whole facade came down.
Yeah.
So you can imagine it was just, it wasn't a very grand experience at that time. The sidewalks that you have now that went all the way up to the hotel, those didn't exist. The rooms hadn't been renovated. And the golf courses, there were 7 courses. The number 7 was under construction at that time, but they really weren't in very good shape. Number 2 was Bermuda greens. They needed to be converted to bent. We could get into that a little bit later, but it was just a tough business model. It had just. Well, here's the good news. You couldn't make a mistake. if you know what I mean.
Only where to go but up, right?
That's it. You could not. So a lot of us were, I'm new at that. I never had run a place like that before. We had Brad Coker, Beth Coker. Don Pageant, we brought him in as our director of golf, which really created a major change in going after major championship golf and the quality of the golf experience. But it was one of those things where we were all just trying hard and trying new ideas. And like anything, if you try 10 things, 2 may work.
Right.
And the 2 worked, and then they kept working.
Sometimes you got to take risks. I worked at ESPN, and in every room, their credo basically was about taking risks, and that things may not work the way you want them to, but you keep trying until you get it right.
Well, that's exactly right, Phil. I mean, that's really what you do. And it's not always you get a situation like that where you can do that. Much harder today.
Right.
But then you had nowhere to go but up. And over time, I think it was just kept building on the changes and the new things and the golf itself.
You were quoted one time talking about history and artifacts and how history is so important, and it allows people to tell your story when you walk through the hallways of Pinehurst and you see all the artifacts there. How important when you got there to understand the history, where Pinehurst had been, where it was when you arrived, and what the vision was going to be for the future? How much was history a part of that?
Well, that was a big key piece of it, actually. You had to resurrect the history. You had to bring it back. Because it had been kind of forgotten about for a long time. An important note here is that everybody looked at it, all the major companies, when it was with Diamond, when it was with the banks, no one wanted it. And that's kind of amazing to hear that now,
right.
But no one wanted it. It was one of those places, like many resorts in the country, old resorts, family resorts, that have fallen on hard times and was basically just about gone. French Lick, Indiana was that way. It's since been resurrected lately, but there were others, and we were one of those that just no one thought it could be restored. So the history of it, storytelling, you know how important storytelling is. And today I look at what they've done in terms of continuing that. But in the beginning, and done a wonderful job, and it really is fabulous storytelling. We had to start from scratch, and we got the idea from a place in northern Michigan called the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. They did fabulous storytelling in the hallways. Today, I think they charge $25 for somebody to come in and take a look at it. but
don't give any ideas.
No, they won't do that here. But it was the idea, like you and I've discussed. The best ideas are somebody else's. You just implement them yourself. And that was one we did. And what was amazing is that you could tell and see the impact, because people that lived in Pinehurst or members would bring their friends in, walk them down the hallway, show them the pictures. The main club in 1991, when we redid that, storytelling there again, put up all the plaques and all the pictures of the greats, including the celebrating the North and South. All that again, and you see it today. They stop in the hallway and they take a look. So storytelling and people telling the story of Pinehurst became really a tremendous impetus to the growth and the resurrection of the asset in terms of its promise as a business entity and its promise as a historic site.
You mentioned hiring Padge as director of golf. Obviously, he had huge contributions as well, but how important was it to recognize that returning championship golf back to Pinehurst Resort was a key factor in bringing back success?
Well, back then everybody talked about it, but nobody was doing anything. It was really kind of it wasn't a focused effort to do that, to bring major championship play back. We had lost our golf professional, our head director of golf, and we needed to find someone else. I called Don Pageant, too, who I knew in Firestone, and he was running Firestone. I said, Don, do you have any interest in this? Would you like to come down and be the director of golf? And he said, Pat, I'm really happy as the general manager of Firestone. I've been here a long time, and I like it a lot, and no, I really don't. But he said, have you talked to my dad? Now, his dad grew up in Indiana. I grew up in Indiana. So I'd always heard of his dad when I was a kid. He was just a big name in golf in Indiana. And I said, no. I said, I thought he was dead. He said, no, he's not dead. He's out in Arizona with Joe Black and Mark Kazar out at Desert Highland, Desert Mountain. And family wants to get him back on the East Coast. Would you talk to him? I said, well, sure. So I called Padge and said, would you come talk to us? He said, yeah, I'll come. So he came over. This was March of 1987. And Padge, I think, was 64 at the time. And he said, well, Pat, what do you want me to do? I said, well, two things. One, bring major championship golf back to Pinehurst. And two, mentor our young golf professionals. And he looked at me and he said, I think I can do that.
and the rest is history.
Well, and it began a journey. It was a journey. At the beginning, we were staying in pretty lousy hotels. He was dragging me to the Opens, to the Senior Opens, to the PGA events and so forth, just to meet people.
Yeah.
And he'd stand there and talk to these guys who all knew him, and I'd stand there with him. He'd introduce me. And they would say, well, Padge, how are things in Pinehurst? He said, well, they're getting better. They're getting better. And so the guy would walk away, and I'd say to Padge, I remember this distinctly. I said, why do you say it's just okay? He says, Patrick, because it is. It's just okay. When it's good, I'll tell him it's good.
Yeah.
And so his credibility, was in place with all those folks. So when he finally did say we were there, that we were worthy, they took that at face value. And I remember the key event no one talks about, to me, two key events. One was the Club Pro Championship, which was all the club professionals that came there. And there were 350 of them that came. That generation had never seen Pinehurst. And then we had in '89 the women's amateur. That was our introduction to the USGA.
Okay.
That was already on the books when we got there, but that's where we met David Fay, where I met him, where they met Padge, and this relationship started to Grant Spaeth was the president of the USGA, so this relationship began. Prior to that, the USGA didn't really think that golf in the South, major play in the South, was going to work.
Yeah.
Atlanta in '75 or '6, when they could throw jarts at the greens, because they just plugged. It was just the weather conditions for the kind of grass we had just wasn't conducive to major championship play. Even P.J. Boatwright, the famous P.J. Boatwright, said, we're never going to have anything here. Well, that's what we were up against, was that. And so we had a fairly successful women's amateur, and then came Dean Beeman. He called Padge in 1990. And he said, Padge, I'd like to bring the Tour Championship to Pinehurst. And he said, it cost you about $500,000, and we want to do it in the beginning of October. Padge came to me. He said, Patrick, here's what it is. What do you want to do? I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I don't think we should take it. We shouldn't pay any money, and we shouldn't, and it's high season.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Beeman calls him back. Padge, I'll tell you what, we'll pass on the fee, no fee, but we got to come beginning of October.
Huh.
And Padge came to me. He said, what do you think? I said, what do you think? He said, I don't think we should do it. I said, okay, we won't do it. Beeman calls him back. And he said, Padge, when can we come? So Padge and I talked about it, and they came Halloween. That was when we had the first Tour Championship, was over Halloween.
Okay.
And that was a big thing for Pinehurst. Remember Jack Whitaker, the ABC broadcast a championship, and Whitaker, I can't say specifically what he said, but he said on national television at the end of the event that the Tour Championship was better because they had come to Pinehurst, and Pinehurst was better because it had the event. And it was true. And then we had it again in 1992. Azinger won that one. And then we had to make the decision: are we going to keep playing ball with the Tour, or are we going to kind of change the game and get closer to the USGA? And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. And so, let's just cut right to 1999. I mean, the USGA obviously awards you a U.S. Open. which, you couldn't have written a better Hollywood script to have Payne Stewart win that. And it's amazing. It's going to be 25 years when we have the 24 U.S. Open here at Pinehurst #2. But talk about leading up to and acquiring the 99 Open, and then, after the aftermath of that, what that meant to the resort.
Well, I remember clearly we made a presentation to the championship committee at Pebble Beach in 1992. Padge and I and Brad Coker. And I remember Reg Murphy, his wife became the president of the USGA just a few years ago, but Reg Murphy, who was the editor of National Geographic magazine from Atlanta, was the chair of that committee. And there was a debate inside. There was a fellow from Colorado who wanted the event to go to Colorado. And we're like flies on the wall listening to this debate and argument going on. And we're just there to tell them about #2, what we could do to make it a championship venue. And Reg Murphy looked at the guy. His name was I forget his first name. His last name was Mastelier. And he looked at him and he said, "I hear you, but we're done talking about it. This event's going south." And so in '92, that was kind of the beginning of the discussion. We had to figure out what to do about the greens, because the greens, I mean, it's just hard to imagine. But we converted the greens from Bermuda to bent grass. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we actually got in a mutated sod. We sodded the greens. Nicholas did it, but we sodded the greens, and we sodded them with Ryosa sod out of Pennsylvania, and it was mutated, and which meant that it cooked. In the summer, it got so bad we had to close #2 for 8 weeks every summer because it was soup.
Yeah.
The greens just turned into soup. And so we had to make a dramatic change. USGA knew that, and we were going to and the timing is a little bit different here because we got the event in 1994. That's when that happened. I went to Baltusrol. They gave us the event for '99, and but with the caveat that the greens would have to be addressed.
Right.
So we were already in the planning stage for #8, and David Fay and I discussed it, and he said, "I'll tell you what, you're going to put G2, a bentgrass variety, on #8. If it works, you need to put it on #2, and we'll play it on that." Mm-hmm. And he said, "But you got to promise me if it doesn't work, that we'll redo the greens to Bermuda. We'll play it on Bermuda. We don't want to, but we will."
Right.
That was a different Bermuda grass then, not champion. It wasn't what it is today. We said, okay. But it wouldn't have been the best surface. It just wouldn't have been. But the G2 worked. And that was the deal with us and the USGA, was really, can you do the conversion? And by the way, the USGA had never done an event in the middle of nowhere before. And so the risk for the event was on our shoulders. It's not like it is today. We ran the event like Pebble used to. Mm-hmm. So we had to create a whole team of people, Tom Pashley being one of them. Yeah. And we had the President's Council and Jim Heiler, who was with First Citizens. We had to create a corporate family to help support the event because USGA supplied the players, and all the costs were ours. We didn't get any TV revenue, but we could keep the revenue from the corporate sales and the ticket sales. That was us. Yeah. So we had to do all that, which, again, they don't do that today. Mm-hmm. And so we hired John Wagner, who was a front guy for the tour, that really was the one who did all the sales. And we set a goal, if we could break even at 35 tents, that was going to be great. We sold 50, the most they'd ever sold. But it was a key piece of that was the President's Council and having corporate leadership from all over North Carolina commit to be engaged in this event. So that began this partnership with the state, with Charlotte, with Raleigh, and the Triangle that really boosted our opportunity to put on an event like that. And it was, again, as I look back at it, 99 there was nothing ever better than that.
Right.
I mean, no offense to what's happened since.
Sure.
It's all wonderful. But Payne Stewart winning the last day of the event with Stewart and Mickelson and Woods all vying for the opportunity. To be there was magical.
Yeah.
And it just set the stage for what happened at Pinehurst going forward.
Obviously, congratulations again on an amazing accomplishment. I mean, it really changed the course of history for Pinehurst Resort, no question. I know Tom Pashley speaks to it very eloquently, and you stepped down in 2004. And Tom, can you talk about Tom Pashley and his leadership? You were on our CVB board, and Tom is our current chairman. He is, and Mr. Dedman, of course. But talk about Tom and passing the baton from him to Tom and what he's been able to accomplish leading up to. And we'll discuss the whole thing with the USGA and what they're planning on doing here in Pinehurst.
Well, it's a very interesting thing what's happened in terms of Pinehurst leadership. And the Dedman family has done something that you don't see very often. There's an incredible continuity of leadership there. When you look at, from my tenure, I handed it off to Padge II, who was a man of golf in his own way. He led Padge is such a great player. He led the U.S. Open for 3 days back in the 70s, and here he was coming from Firestone to be to run Pinehurst. So he built upon what his dad and what our team had done, and then came Tom. Now Tom was interesting because I got a call one day from Rod Myers, who was the golf coach up at Duke, and he said, "Pat, I got a guy here that's our assistant golf coach. He says he wants to be in the resort business." And I said, "Well, what's his major?" He said, "Well, he's getting his master's in marketing, and he's got an offer from Eli Lilly." I said, "You sure he wants to come down and talk to me?" He said, "He does. Will you talk to him?" I said, "Well, yeah." And we were starting a management training program. So Tom came down, and I painted about the bleakest, darkest picture I possibly could, because hospitality, as you know, is not easy.
Right.
It's a huge commitment. Sundays or Tuesdays.
Holidays.
Yes, holidays. I mean, it's just a different lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
And so I painted this picture for him, and it didn't shake him. I mean, he was committed. I said, "Well, here's the training program. You're gonna start out washing dishes, because if you need to understand those folks. You need to be able to get along with them, because you have to lead them, and you can't lead them if you don't have a relationship with them. And then you're going to go to golf, maintenance, and you're going to go to housekeeping, and you're going to..." Didn't shake him. Said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds great." And I said, "Well, here's the one thing I don't want to happen. I don't want to get a phone call from your father saying, 'What did you do to my son?' to convince him to do what he's doing, because he's turning down a darn good job with Eli Lilly to come work for you for not much money." And he said, "He'll never call you." I said, "Okay." So we hired Tom. And Tom went through all the training program. He worked in every department. And then he was a great fit in championship management. And that's where he met so many of the key leaders in North Carolina. That's why he's so incredibly valuable. One of the reasons why he's incredibly valuable to the resort is because he's a 27-year repository of relationships that were built over that time. So he is again a perfect handoff from a continuity standpoint. I think he's been there 27 years.
Yeah.
And he's been running it for what, 8 or 9, or I'm not sure how
around
many.
that time, yeah.
So I ran it for 17, Padge ran it for 10, and now comes Tom. But it's continuity. It's not that any of us was extraordinarily brilliant, but what we were is continuity in an environment with the same ownership by the same family.
Right.
That is rare.
Continuity, consistency. It's like Steelers head coaches. They've only had 3, just so many years, because they got the formula down. It's the tradition and the knowledge of how to do the job. Let's fast forward to the USGA's decision a couple years ago, almost to the day as we tape this, to decide to build a second headquarters in Pinehurst. Golf House Pinehurst, World Golf Hall of Fame most recently announced coming back. What is the impact of that going to be? We've heard $2 billion over the course of time till the next or the final U.S. Open in 2047 of the ones we'll have 24, 29, 35, 41, 47. Tom's impressed that I committed those to memory. But what is the impact of that decision and having Mike Wan at the helm to lead this charge and what the USGA is going to do here?
Well, I can't find the correct term, but it's a culmination. Pinehurst is now cemented as there is nothing like it. It's the pinnacle with this decision they made. I'm an RNA member.
Yep.
And you know what that means over there. The RNA is the institution that handles the rules of golf for the world outside of the USGA's world. And they are sit atop the 18th hole at the Old Course in a community that lives, breathes, eats, sleeps golf. What just happened? Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The triumvirate of great golf and a golf resort, along with the rules-making body, and a community that eats, sleeps, and breathes golf, has now been duplicated. It's a combination that is unparalleled except for the USGA. So in the world, there are, in the world of golf, there are two. And one is in Scotland, and one's in Pinehurst, North Carolina. But I have to say, Phil, the journey to get there that began with David Fay and Grant Spaeth back in 1987, that as time went on, the continuity of the USGA, because remember, David Fay, who is a good friend of mine, handed off the baton to Mike Davis. And now Mike Davis has handed off the baton. And all of us knew all those guys very well. The Pinehurst Championship Management Team, guess where they are? They all work for the USGA.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Reg Jones, Robbie Zelznick, all those guys work for the USGA. Janine Driscoll,
Right.
and she was our head of external public relations for the resort. So that's how close this relationship is with the USGA. It's not happenstance. It's not a deal-making thing. It's an integration of personalities and attitudes and beliefs about the game of golf that have melded over time into a decision to locate the second headquarters here. And I'll tell you, I go back to the second Open in 2005. David Fay called me shortly after the 99 Open and said, I got a question for you. He said, can you guys take the 2005 Open? I said, what? I said, we just finished.
Right.
Said, we've got some things going on in USGA, and you are the one, you, meaning Pinehurst, is the one place that can pull this off that fast. That was coming back to Pinehurst within 6 years, which hadn't been done since, I think it was Chanticleer in 1945
Right.
or 46. So for them to say that to us and ask us to do that, really, again, put us in another great position in terms of relationships with the USGA. And so to me, the decision for the golf house is a culmination. It is everything that went on before. All the relationships, past and present, have all culminated in this extraordinary opportunity. And a lot of folks will take credit for it, and they should, because it was a lot of engagement by a lot of people, the state, the politicians, Tom McGinnis, Jimmy Bowles. It was a combination of relationships that helped make all this happen. But I got to tell you, Phil, it's just nothing will ever happen when the stories are told in the future. I think this is the capstone. This is the culmination of what everybody calls the golden age of Pinehurst. How many have there been? we've arrived.
Yeah, no question. Well said. Great story. Aside from Pinehurst Resort, you've had so many roles. We can go through everything you've done, your accomplishments. They are numerous, but most notably and most recently, you were executive director of Partners in Progress, the economic development arm for Moore County, which Natalie Dean Hawkins has stepped in and is doing a great job. And you can certainly comment on that. But during your time there, in trying to lead the economic development charge, you formed what's called a golf cluster. And so with Jamie Ledford with Golf Pride, Tom Pashley, Kelly Miller, Chris Vondercall from US Kids, talk about the business environment of golf and where we're trying to lead this destination when it comes to attracting more businesses to either start their business here or to relocate to the Pinehurst area.
Well, I think this will help answer the question you really asked me earlier that I went off on another direction. But what does this mean in terms of the impact, the economic impact of what's happening in terms of the opens and the opportunities that are presented by the USGA having their second headquarters here? Well, I think the key to it is going to be their testing center. I mean, that's a big piece of the opportunity. We have an agreement with them that they will introduce us, Partners in Progress, Natalie, to every company that comes in for testing. So we see pioneers like Jamie Ledford and the commitment that he made. Mm-hmm. That's just a tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. So this golf cluster concept is really to hopefully create an opportunity where the home of golf is also the home of major manufacturers in the golf industry. Now, by manufacturers, I don't mean they'll make things here. They may make some. The niche companies could.
Right.
But where they have actually the research and development and corporate opportunities here. That's the kind of thing that's a hand in the glove for our community. Is if that can happen. So the introductions have been made. There are companies here already, and I think that Natalie's going to have her hands full with opportunities
right.
to bring these companies here as we go forward with the testing center and the whole environment of so many of those companies coming here and seeing what's here and want to be here.
It's a great environment for it, for sure. Well, now you're retired. I'm sure you're playing some golf. I remember we played a couple years ago in your Partners in Progress golf tournament, and at the end of that event, you were awarded the highest honor in the state of North Carolina, the Order of the Longleaf Pine. What was it like that day? I remember you're a very proud gentleman, and you come from a great history, an Italian family, and you talked about your dad and how much that meant to you. Talk about how much it meant to win that award, and is it the greatest honor you've ever received?
Well, thanks for mentioning it. It is, because it's. I mean, that's an award that you don't seek. Mike Krzyzewski just got it.
Yeah.
That last week. You know, it's something when the state of North Carolina says to you that your career or your efforts have impacted the state of North Carolina in a significant way. That's a pretty humbling thing. Mm-hmm. To hear from the governor, from Chris Chung, who was the head of sales and marketing for the state. That was pretty impressive. My great grandfather received a similar order from recognition from the state of Indiana, and that's the Sagamore of the Wabash, it's called. And I knew he'd received it, but so it was quite a thing for me. But you know, I what's the old saying? You know, North Carolinian by birth or North Carolinian by choice. Mm-hmm. I'm a North Carolinian by choice, and my family. This state has been so good to me and to my family. That it holds an emotional place in our hearts. Even though we have a cottage in Michigan where we go back to in the summer, this is home and always will be.
And as we start to wrap up this podcast, we could go on. I mean, we barely touched the surface of your accomplishments, and we could go on, and we haven't even talked about your golf game. But what is Pat Corso? I'm sure you're still dabbling in some business, but what are you doing now besides traveling, playing some golf? You're still doing a little consulting. I guess specifically, the last question I want to ask you is, where do you see this destination going from an overall tourism perspective? So we talk about here at the CVB, we know golf is king. It's in our DNA, but we also need to be more than just golf and diversify. And you see so many things going on with short-term rental discussions, and how do we balance growth versus restoring our, maintaining our history and the quaintness and the charm of what this destination holds. What do you see for the future as we get into 2029, 2030, the next 10 years, where this place is going to double, roads are going to be expanded? How do we grow in such a way that people are still endeared to this destination?
Well, it's a challenge, Phil. And I think it is, because I think the efforts you're making, the CVB is doing in terms of promoting all the assets of the community are really stellar. We look at the breweries that are here. We look at the retail that's grown. We look at and unique retail. When we look at the programs like the Passport program and other things that benefit all the other kinds of businesses here, you're doing a great job. And
thank you.
That means we're going to get more people coming, and that means we're going to have more people wanting to live here. It's just that simple. The challenge we have is that we're a bit fractioned. We never have gotten over the parochialism, in my opinion. The good news is we have 3 wonderful, unique, and historic towns.
Right.
The bad news is we have 3 unique, valuable, and historic towns. We really are one community with 3 neighborhoods, and ultimately, those communities have to learn to work together to achieve infrastructure that benefits them all, that includes transportation and overall infrastructure, and really focus on the cause and effect. Each town feels that is looking at what happens inside their boundaries as being issues and threats. The real threats are external. And so the question is, can we figure out a way to recognize that and to face that challenge and come up with a way to deal with it? There is a Tri-City group that we helped create that works on those kind of joint issues, but it's going to become more and more important as every day goes by, as we begin to reach the fulfillment of what you just said in terms of this community being
right,
large and hopefully as nice as it always was.
Well, we certainly appreciate all your contributions, your insights, your perspective, your opinion. You've been a great friend. You've been a mentor. You're always welcome, as you know, to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, to this podcast, to this destination. We appreciate everything you've done. And thanks for taking time out before you jet off to Italy and enjoy some good wine and some great food, I'm sure.
I'm looking forward to it, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Well, thanks again to Pat Corso. If you want to learn more about the destination, go to homeofgolf.com. If you want to watch this vodcast, you can go to our YouTube channel at Home of American Golf. If you want to download this podcast, just go to your favorite podcatcher. I like Spotify, and you can check out this podcast and the rest of the Paradise in the Pines podcast series. For Pat Corso, I'm Phil Wers. We'll see you next time in Paradise in the Pines. That was awesome. Thank you very much.